basically my second case that I did in assessing a family was, what I know now is a parental alienation case. And I was just thinking, what on earth is going on here? Everybody's lying. It wasn't like a neglect case or an abuse case. Everybody was lying and nobody seemed to notice the other professionals. The level of bias that I saw, in the beliefs that, children don't lie, and that mothers are always victims and fathers are always oppressors, and these children are perfectly happy, and it was quite frankly bonkers.
My name is Lawrence Joss, and welcome to the Family Disappeared podcast. Today we have Melanie Gill, an attachment specialist, psychologist, forensic consultant, and expert witness, and she's coming out of the UK, which is kind of fun with her accent and some of the words she uses. It was really heartwarming to hear some of the languaging that I grew up with in South Africa, and Melanie is just full of a plethora of information. So for this particular podcast, have a pen, a piece of paper, your phone out to take some notes. Some of the therapies she suggests and some of the ideas that she shares are really, really interesting. There's a lot of density to the podcast and fascinating, and she is really, really cool on top of that. So welcome to the community. If you're new, this is a great podcast and interesting, and like I got to go re-listen and take some notes and look up some of these different therapies that she was talking about, and a couple big words came up that I had to ask what they even meant, because I don't know. I thought I knew more than I know, but I guess that's a little humbling and funny at the same time too. So I'm just coming down from taping the podcast and have some stuff rattling around in my head. So welcome to the show. There's a bunch of great information in the show notes. There's a bunch of links to YouTube videos and webinars that Melanie's done. There's our email address, familydisappeared@gmail.com. Let us know different guests, ideas, thoughts, or if you just want to say hello, or if we can support you in any way. And there's also a link to our free 12-step support group, 18-19 meetings a week, Parental Alienation Anonymous. It's a phenomenal place to build community. The one thing that I know for sure for myself is I can't do this by myself. I need community. I need people that are going through the same stuff. I need those people to walk the path with. Otherwise, it's unbearable for me. So with those wonderful, warm sentiments and that little whatever that was, let's jump into the show. In my marriage, I thought things were okay. I thought things were going along well, and we were just a family loving each other. And I couldn't really identify some of the behaviors that were going on, and now with a little bit of perspective, like I can see that enmeshment that was going on between my ex-partner and my children. And I can also identify like the control mechanisms, right? The control mechanisms of my ex needing the kids to help regulate her nervous system. And I also want to qualify by saying this, like, we all have trauma in our lives, and my ex had trauma in her life too. And I don't think she came in this world to create any kind of harm. And there's some really wonderful qualities about her, and I'm just identifying this attachment disorder that was going on, that I didn't even have the word attachment disorder, right? And the show really talks about attachment disorders today, and a really great understanding that attachment only comes online when our children are born. Like instantly, they're trying to attach to us, and it's just fascinating looking back with the more information that I get and the more interpersonal work that I do. I look back at the family system and I see that this always existed, but I couldn't identify it. So I'm so grateful that we get to do the show and we get to talk about this. And I get to go back to some of those places and work with some of my wounds and work with some of my trauma and my secondary trauma. And it's challenging. And if you're new to this journey, welcome. And it's a slow process and it's not linear. Some days we're going up and feeling good and understanding stuff, and some days just suck, and some days the heart just hurts and we're longing for our children. So I don't know. I hope that was useful. And either way, let's get on with the show. Hi, Melanie. It's so wonderful to have you on the show today. And I just want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself to the community so everyone can get to know you a little bit. So, can you please say hello and let everybody know who you are?
Hello, my name's Melanie Gill. I'm an attachment specialist, a psychologist, and a forensic consultant, and I've been acting as an expert witness in parental alienation cases for 16 years. But I've also been a political consultant as well, trying to bring scientific information and information about attachment and neuroscience and all that sort of thing to politicians so they can make better policy. And many years ago, around about the 2000s, I had a charity called the Mindful Policy Group, and we did well. We did well bringing information about these cases and trying to get policy changed and new laws made. But it all fell away when various politicians came in and their focus was entirely on, the economy, and people were sort of sidelined really. But I'm back at sort of on the campaigning trail now, because how can you not be when you do this work?
100%. Well, that sounds like some really wonderful and useful work that you're doing, and the frustrations around the politics and people prioritizing consumption and money over actually human lives is really it is really sad and discouraging. And I'm really it's neat that you're doing that work. And you mentioned that you're an attachment specialist, and can you let the audience know a little bit of what that means, because a lot of people might not really be familiar what the attachment styles and different things are.
Well, I mean, attachment is absolutely fundamental to how everybody develops, how their brain develops, and it's through your attachment relationships from the minute you're born that your brain starts growing, and your brain doesn't develop properly without being in conjunction with somebody else's brain, and that's your parents' brain. And so, of course, it's extremely sensitive to attachment relationships. So this is so fundamental. Attachment dynamics. There's really nothing else that you need to know about when it comes to what's going on in families, what's going on in children, and disrupted attachment is at the base of all the mental illnesses, physical illnesses. And if you look in the therapy rooms across the world, there are millions and millions of people undergoing therapy because of disrupted attachment relationships. And I've learned a very specific model and theory of attachment, which is actually now the only validated model. There were two models. There was probably the one that everybody knows, which is the ABC plus D model. And then there's the dynamic maturational model of attachment, which was developed by Dr. Patricia Crittenden. That's the one I've done, and the theory is just amazing, and it's to do with adaptation. From the minute you're born, you adapt to your parents and how your parents are, and as I said, that's what grows your brain or doesn't grow your brain, according to what the relationship is. And the assessments that flow from that model are the ones that I've been using for the last 16 years on these cases. And they have given me so much incredible information. They really get to what is the story here? Why are these people doing what they're doing? What is actually happening to the children, instead of just looking at the surface of it and describing behavior.
That's fascinating. And like you're actually getting under the hood and seeing how everything's programmed and how everything's all wired together. And if we could just do kind of like a rudimentary layperson's example of like attachment and how your brain connects with the parent's brain, can you give us like a really quick, short, really basic understanding of just one example so folks can kind of track that a little bit better?
Well, the brain, the minute you're born, your brain expects, in evolutionary terms, this is what's happened. We have a brain that expects input from another human being from your attachment figure. And if your brain doesn't get that, then your brain is harmed. Your brain is very severely harmed. And you know, if you can think to, say, the Romanian orphans who they did brain scans on, and I don't know if you remember there were lots and lots of Romanian orphans from the civil war, I think, that happened in Romania. And so there were all these orphanages, and they went and scanned the brains of these babies and children, and they were not getting even touched. They weren't getting looked at. They weren't getting any eye contact. They were getting nothing, and their brains were much smaller than what you would expect in a child's brain. It was absolutely appalling, and they had high rates of ADHD and ASD. It was absolutely dreadful what happened to them.
Wow. So basically, when I'm connecting with my mom and I come out of her womb, if she's present and emotionally available, my brain starts to grow at a regular pace with her. But if she is um, emotionally disturbed or not regulated and she comes in and out of contact, then there's a severe effect on my brain and how I start to develop as a child. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. But your brain will adapt to it because it doesn't have any choice. You know, this is the thing. Children have to adapt. There's no choice. You have to go and try, and your brain will go and try and make the most of whatever, the environment is that you're born into. So it will just sit there, just adapting and adapting and trying to, work out what the heck you should be doing in these circumstances. The influence that parents have on their children is total. And people have absolutely lost that understanding, and they look at, some of the behaviors that are happening in society at the moment and start blaming the other parent. It takes two parents to bring up a child, and that child is connected, absolutely through the body and brain to their parents.
And if one parent is kind of coming in and out of contact emotionally and is a little bit dysregulated and the other parent is more regulated, is a child adapting and just garnishing from each parent what it can? That sounds kind of like crazy making if it's getting like two
Yeah.
different inputs coming in at such a young
Yeah,
age.
that's exactly what happens. It's trying, and the brain will try and compensate for that. In these cases, what you see is this thing called cognitive dissonance. And I've explained, I think, in about 3 of the webinars I've done on Families Divided television, what cognitive dissonance means. And it means that basically the brain is faced with these two choices, which are the opposite of each other. And what the brain always tries to do, because it's in charge, you're not, the brain is always trying to protect you. There's all these ancient bits of the brain that are there to absolutely try and keep you alive. So what the brain will do is we'll get rid of one of the ideas, bing, and you're left with just one thing, and that means the brain can settle. Now, people usually do that, now and again. So that capacity is there to use now and again. In children in these situations, they're doing it over and over and over again, and that is damaging the brain, essentially. It's damaging the brain over and over every day, minute by minute, and there's nothing that can be done.
My follow-up question to you would be, so at this young age, this kid's looking for something from its parents, it's getting some, and then it's adapting and maladapting to whatever it's able to get. And then that's carried on into teenage years, young adult years, and adult years, and they're still to some degree using the same mechanism unless they do some really intense interpersonal work to start to heal that wound, I guess. Is that even possible?
The point is, and what's been found is that the harm done to children's brains through trauma, because this, at the end of the day, these relationships are hugely traumatic for children. Seeing the two people that they love, even if when they're babies, seeing and sensing. That's the main thing is, that's what a lot of people don't understand, is that even babies can sense when there's anger. Because if you think about it, an angry parent is one of the most dangerous things that a baby, can happen to a baby. So the baby's brain is absolutely pre-programmed to recognize anger in the voice, in the smell, in the sight, a furrowed brow, that sort of thing. And the brain will try and protect. The baby will adapt. So, say with a constantly angry parent, what a baby learns very, very, very early on is that it's best not to cry, because crying will probably make that parent angrier. And so you get these very, very quiet babies who don't protest, because if they do protest, that's really dangerous. So that's how fast it is. And in one of the webinars I have, there's a piece of film that I show with a 2-year-old little girl who's been filmed with her very, very depressed mother. And you see this little girl trying her best. She's only 2. She's trying her best to cheer her mother up, to get her mother to, think positively. It's a shocking video. And, and if we ever do, say, another session, then I can show it. But it just goes to show, how very early on children's brains are busy trying to work out how they cope, how they can manage, how they can stay alive emotionally and physically in the toxic environment that they've been born into.
Wow. And for anyone out there that's listening, Melanie's mentioned Family Divided Television, which is a YouTube station that I will make sure is in the show notes with links to all Melanie's interviews and webinars that she's done, so everyone can continue to watch and learn from Melanie. And I also curious about this, like you're saying, once the baby's born, that this attachment starts, but doesn't it actually start in vitro when the baby's still in the belly and getting energetic responses from the birth parent and feeling their anxiety and stuff that's going on? Doesn't it predate birth?
No, it doesn't actually. The attachment system actually, it comes online, and then the attachment relationship develops over the first few months as brain to brain starts connecting. And when they found that when you have attunement, when you have, say, a mother and a baby looking into each other's eyes, the brain lights up like a firework. There's some beautiful research which they went in and did the brain scans, and they showed this wonderful sort of firework going off when baby and mummy were looking at each other, and it was really lovely attunement.
Okay, well, that's fascinating. I always thought it started in vitro, so I really appreciate that clarification. And the word that I learned was like limbic attunement, and when the
Yes.
mother is attuning to the child, and energetically she's supposed to be taking care of the child, but if she's not really available and looking for the child to take care of her, the limbic attunement is going in the wrong direction. Is that part of the attachment disorder?
Yes, I mean, things can go wrong, and as I said, the baby will adapt. If you have a depressed mum, then the depressed mum is probably not going to look into their baby's eyes as much as a non-depressed mum, and the baby will learn that maybe looking into their mother's eyes are sad. And the brain recognizes sadness. This is a negative experience. This is, there's the again in one of my webinars, I show the still face film. I don't know if you know it, in which it's a mummy and a baby, and baby and mummy are just lovely together. They're laughing and joking. And then the mum turns around and turns back and has an absolutely still face. So there's no emotion coming out of it. And you see this baby go to pieces. It absolutely goes to pieces because it's not getting any signals at all. There's just this awful still face. And, eventually the baby is screaming in emotional pain and arching its back and that sort of thing. I mean, it's difficult to watch, but it just shows, the absolute power of this brain to brain connection.
Wow, that is a really, really, really powerful story. And for anyone out listening in the community, if you're unfamiliar with the word attunement, attunement is just when one person is really connecting with another person and they're both really, really present. And you must probably have experienced this in a conversation when you're making eye contact and there's this moment where everything feels like it's just smooth and working together. That's what attunement is that we're talking about. And also in your introduction, Melanie, you mentioned the word neuroscience. And I don't think everyone's necessarily familiar with what that means. Can you just give a quick definition of what neuroscience means?
Well, you're looking at the brain. You're looking at the brain systems and how the brain operates. And there's some absolutely amazing neuroscientists out there who have done so much incredible work on trauma, especially. So there's people like Bruce Perry, Alan Shaw, Martin Teacher, who has gone in and using science fiction type imaging techniques, because imaging children's brains is easy. Can you imagine putting them in the sort of scanners that adults go in, and finding these minute areas of the brain that are affected by very different sorts of trauma? It's astonishing stuff and well worth going and looking at. I got into neuroscience through wanting to understand exactly how people develop. The second degree I did, which was in child forensic psychology, involved a lot to do with the brain, an awful lot to do with the brain, to do with attachment, and to do with memory, and that was what sparked my interest. And I've gone on further. I would not say I was a neuroscientist at all, but you can't understand humans without understanding what's going on in the brain. And it's unfortunate that things like psychiatric diagnoses don't take into consideration, the burgeoning research on what the brain does and how the brain and the body connect, because they're not separate. Whatever trauma goes on psychologically and emotionally affects the brain, and that affects the body.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, and yeah, and is very intricately involved in parental alienation, and the anxiety and the fear and the body pains and everything like that is definitely something people really need to educate themselves on. And I'm curious, Melanie, what brought you into like this field of work around parental alienation and advocacy and the political scene? Like, how did you get here?
Well, I did my second degree in child forensic psychology, which was looking at children who've been, abused in some way, but also children who abuse. And it got me sort of quite activated, because I thought nothing is being done about these children. We can do something about these children. And so I went and harassed a political group and said, can I bring this knowledge in? I was extremely confident, not so much now. And I got involved with basically what's called in the UK a think tank, and worked with them in producing various reports, which are still available, on how children actually develop, how families develop. And it wasn't all from my knowledge, because my knowledge at that time was was a lot smaller than it is now. So, but what it meant I could do was I could go and ask the world's experts if they would come and bring that knowledge to politicians. So I actually started campaigning before I then went into work an expert witness, about 18 years ago, really. And basically my second case that I did in assessing a family was, what I know now as a parental alienation case. And I was just thinking, what on earth is going on here? Everybody's lying. It wasn't like a neglect case or an abuse case. Everybody was lying, and nobody seemed to notice the other professionals. The level of bias that I saw, in the beliefs that, children don't lie, and that mothers are always victims and fathers are always oppressors, and, these children are perfectly happy. And it was quite frankly bonkers. And, by the fourth case, I could see this pattern emerging. And the adult attachment interview, which is this form of assessment which there is no way out of. If you give, say, a psychometric test to parents in these cases, a questionnaire, are you a nice parent? what are they going to say? They're going to say, yes, I'm gorgeous, I'm lovely. And so psychometric tests, everybody lies. So you're never going to get the truth. The adult attachment interview gets to the truth because your brain's in control and you're asking questions about the past, and the brain can't control the mouth quickly enough, and the brain doesn't think it should. So you get this interview, and the language, the discourse, and the behavior that goes with the discourse is analysed. And the problem is, as I said, you can't control what comes out of your mouth all the time. And that gives you this enormous amount of information on things that were traumatic in the past, things that you haven't resolved from that trauma, really specific incidents, and trauma that is resolved, and also attachment patterns that can be linked to psychopathology, and a total explanation of why that adult is behaving the way they are. And there is no way around it. And believe you me, people try, people lie. And that's absolutely fine, because you can see the lies, you can see what they're lying about. And again, as I said, you can't lie all the time. Even, the most delusional people can't lie all the time. So using that, I started to see this pattern in the parent who was causing the most harm, but also seeing the pattern in the parent who was causing the least harm, and then seeing the patterns of what happened to the children in relation to each parent. And I saw it over and over and over again. It was just astonishing. And, one day I want to publish all this. But I have got data on hundreds of interviews, and everything was filmed. Everything's filmed, everything's recorded.
Wow.
And so I gradually realized that I didn't have enough knowledge. So I started going off in the direction of finding, finding out what was actually, the knowledge I needed to help get me to the point where people couldn't get away with anything. No stone was left unturned to get to the bottom of what was happening in these specific families. Because, of course, everybody's unique, but you could start grouping them into these, categories, especially narcissism in all its complexity, and psychopathy, and the things I was finding to do with the etiology of these conditions was amazing. And it's not me, it's the form of assessment which is so incredibly powerful.
Wow. And can you tell me what etiology means? I haven't heard that word before.
It means, why, what's the developmental, pathway that's got this person to where they are now. Because when you know something in that level of detail, you can say, right, okay, so we actually need to work on that bit, we need to work on that bit. They've got unresolved trauma from their own parents' separation, and that's being projected onto, their situation now. So they hate their husband, or they hate their wife. All that you get in the most incredible detail. And with children, there's specific assessments for children. But I was also, because I was trained forensically, I was trained in interviews that get to the truth with children. And also the ability to analyse forensic interviews that are given to children when they make allegations of abuse.
And the assessment that you were talking about with the parents and stuff, is that standard in the UK, that there's always that assessment? Is this just like a rare few times that this happens?
No, there's a cohort of people are trained in it. No one will do these cases anymore. Because of what happened to me in the UK, there's a witch hunt against me. People who are specially trained in this form of assessment won't have anything to do with these cases, because would you want to, have your professional status ripped to shreds in public? No, I don't think so. So No, it's not standard. The standard form of assessment here is a clinical psychology assessment, which looks at the presenting behaviour and is subject, therefore, to a huge number of biases. And also, they use psychometric testing, which, as I've just said, you can't. It's not validated on these cases because everybody lies, including children.
Well, it sounds like you did some really wonderful work when you had the opportunity, and yeah, it's a really sad state when people are getting attacked for doing their work and helping families, and you're not able to continue moving that forward because the forensic analyzing and the assessments that you're doing sound incredibly useful and healing for the family and especially for the children.
Yes, I mean, and I've gone on. I'm doing another master's now in behavioural science and credibility analysis,
Wow.
basically. And
Another
that's been
degree.
incredible. That's been incredible because I've been looking at the neuroscience of deception, and um, a lot of the harm that's being done to children neurologically that's where it was. So I pieced together sort of some of the specific harms that are done to children neurologically. And again, that's in a webinar that's on Families Divided TV, which is to do with what's going on in brains and bodies. Because this is one of the most complex forms of deception. Because not only are you lying to your children, you are also expecting that your child will become involved in your lies, will validate your lies, will believe your lies, and then will also lie. And that level of, those layers of complexity damage children's brains. Lying damages your brain. The more you lie, the more you're going to lie because your brain gets used to it. But children's brains and people in general, lying is a big danger. So brains are, they're looking for danger all the time, and they recognize that something's not right. So they recognize that something's not right. Now, the trouble with children is that bit of the brain is switched off in attachment relationships because why on earth would your parents lie to you?
Huh.
And so, and this is what I said about cognitive dissonances. So you're getting, a child's brain is going, well, that's not right. That's not right. And yet, mummy or daddy is saying, no, that's true. That's true. So the brain is in absolute turmoil and is damaged as a result of it.
Mm.
So, looking at deception and what I'm learning are the ways to detect deception. Because actually, also, if we could go into these cases and say, that person is lying, you could stop them really quickly. And that doesn't happen, does it? I mean, you go into a case and people are going, well, that might be true, that might be true. We have to listen to that. We have to listen to that. And caught in the middle of all this deception all the time as it goes through courts are the children. And, people are half believed, not believed, there's biases and all this sort of thing. So cases can go on, as you know, for years and years and years. And yet if you just went in and said, there's the liar, that would finish it. So that's what I'm training in.
Well, that's incredible. That's yeah. That sounds incredibly useful, and that you're going back to school and learning more stuff with all the education you have. That's wonderful, and that sounds like a lot. So what happens in the child's body and brain as they're in the child's body and brain as they're experiencing alienation? Like how does that manifest behaviorally in children developmentally as they're going along? Wow. My wow's a little bit softer today because that was a lot of information and some really fantastic stuff. And yeah, definitely something that I'll have to listen to 2 or 3 different times because there's a lot of information coming out, some different words, some different theories, and it is she's out of the UK, so some of the languaging is a little bit different, and we're working with some of those therapies here in the US and Canada, and they're called somewhat differently, and there's just some fascinating information. I really like when Melanie introduces the idea of cognitive dissidence, which is basically our brain fighting against what we're getting, but what we actually really need, and just trying to readapt to different realities that are presented to ourselves. I really thought that was really important. And if you're not familiar with cognitive dissidence, write it down, Google it. Yeah, just a lot of great stuff in the show. And again, I'm just in this processing mode, so I don't know. I don't feel 100% present with you all, and I apologize for that. But this is what I got. Hopefully, it's received in the fashion that it's offered. And thanks for coming out and listening to the show today. Again, check out the show notes. A bunch of great resources. Would love to see you around the free 12-step meetings. It's a wonderful, robust, loving, kind community. And again, familydisappeared@gmail.com is our email if you have anything you'd like to say or connect with us. We'd love to hear from you. And lastly, we're a 501c3 nonprofit, and we need your support. We don't get a lot of donations. If you're connected with any institutions or foundations that might be useful us to connect with, we'd love to hear about that too. And remember, us as parents, as grandparents, as alienated children and stuff, like, we are our own silver bullets, and we need to advocate for change, and we need to be out on the streets, like, doing this work and sharing this information. So please share this, like, comment, um, become part of our community, contribute what you have to offer, because none of us can do this alone, including, our organization. Our podcast is so many different people contributing to it. So thank you for coming out to play today. In case no one's told you yet today, I love you. I hope you have a beautiful day. And yeah, I'm going to go. I think I'm going to go take a nap.